The history of heavy.
Hello and welcome. Episode 38 of the History of Heavy podcast. This is the show where we trace the chronology of heavy music across genre, song by song. I am your co-host, Michael Huntsman. That is your other co-host, Big Daddy Dave Lieberman. We have been gone for a few weeks, various life events keeping us apart, but we are back together again. Dave, it is so good to see your face. How are you, my friend?
I am so happy to be back on our reunion tour. I've really missed this portion of my life, my week. It kind of helps keep things balanced. I'm so happy to be back talking about some bitchin' music.
Yeah, me too. It's been a minute. This is a big-ish episode. This is our last episode to talk about the last song we will talk about for the year of 1971 before we move into the the next phase of the 1970s, which will be fun. And, recent episodes, we have talked about Alice Coltrane and Funkadelic and, some less straight ahead heavy rock songs, but we are getting back into form today. So that will be fun.
Yes, 100%. 100%.
And, just a brief bit of history of heavy pod business that I wanted to share for those that listen just to the podcast. And thank you if you do. While during our recording hiatus, where we do these longer form, 40-minute, hour-long conversations to talk about a song or an album, I primarily started a TikTok channel. I had never been on TikTok before. And have religiously 3 times a week been posting to the History of Heavy. We now have about 650 followers on TikTok. And that has been really fun. That has been kind of 3 categories that I am posting regularly about. One is short versions of these episodes. So I just posted the Captain Beefheart episode short today. Every week I'm doing something called the Heavy 5, where I do a list of 5 things on a different topic every week. And then I'm doing some record review stuff and some editorial kind of stuff. But that has just been super fun. TikTok is new to me. I'm a kind of an idiot when it comes to TikTok, but I'm navigating my way. And we're slowly building a following over there. So check us out because that's really been fun.
Oh, that's super cool. You'll be happy to know that you just popped up on my feed through YouTube because I don't have TikTok. I should probably get it if we are going to be there in our delegation of you representing we. Look at us having a social media footprint.
Yeah, and I want you to get on there. I did it as just kind of this fun thing, and it started to organically just grow a little bit. Over two months. It's not a lot of people, but we'll grow it, and that's been kind of a new fun way to express and talk about this stuff. So we'll keep doing that. We of course have our Spotify playlists that track the songs that we talk about on these episodes. I also have a weekly Heavy 5 pod or a playlist on Spotify that has all the different songs that I'm talking about on that series on TikTok. So this has been a very fun thing that has kept you and I connected as friends and music lovers, but also a great distraction from the world that continues to be burning around us.
Yes.
So with that in mind, we every week, of course, we talk about the culture, and there's a lot of angst that happens in your cultural corner. We have talked about wars, and we have talked about deaths, and we have talked about all kinds of manner of global and national unease, and all of it seems trivial compared to what's happening in the world today. But again, this is the last song we are going to be talking about of 1971, but we cannot get to that song until we do go to your cultural corner, Dave. So what do you have to wrap up the year of 1971 this week?
Michael, we have a little something different today. We have covered the cultural context of the year of our song 1971. But another element of culture that is really important is our present time contemporary culture. And recently we learned of the passing of Ace Frehley. Ace Frehley fits into our conversation as a member of Kiss, and I thought it would be appropriate to spend a few minutes talking about Ace Frehley and Kiss and the cultural relevance to our conversation overall, and bring that, but bubble that to the surface. And so I kind of want to interview you a little bit about that because you are much more familiar with Kiss, having had a huge influence in your own life by Kiss, and really turning me on to Kiss. Be you can't have been born in the 60s and 70s and not known about Kiss. So I knew about Kiss, but it wasn't until you and I came together that I actually got into them.
Hmm.
So I wanted to ask you a little bit about, and you've alluded to this at different times in our conversation because it's relevant and it's come up before. But if you could take us back to the first, if you remember the first time you heard Kiss, and then talk about that first Kiss album that you got and what that did to you.
Yeah. I'm really happy to be talking about this. I really like the notion of the cultural corner evolving into this thing that not only includes setting the scene for the song or the topic of the night, but also what's going on in heavy music today, or
Sure.
what's relevant. And Ace Frehley dying is certainly relevant. We will be getting to Kiss proper when we get to 1974. We'll be talking about a song from their second record, Hotter Than Hell. That is in exactly 7 episodes. But I'm glad we're talking about Ace a little bit now. He passed now a couple of weeks ago. Um, and it was a big one for me, losing a lot of our heroes in recent years. Ozzy Osbourne, we just lost, and we're hardcore Black Sabbath devotees, so that was a really difficult one.
Neil Peart.
Neil Peart, Lemmy, David Bowie, Prince. I mean, lots of really big, important ones in not not too long ago, recent years. Ace is unique though, for me, just because I am of a generation where Kiss. I was born in 1968, so their first record comes out when I'm like 5 or something. Um, and they, I've talked about this a lot on the show. I grew up with older sisters, so my introduction to music was really from them. That my young musical education came from them. So whatever they were listening to, whatever is big in the day, and in the, really, let's call it early 70s, is the music that I grew up listening to, be it the Beatles or the Doobie Brothers or Linda Ronstadt or Fleetwood Mac or whatever. And that was the music of my childhood. And then Kiss happened, and Kiss really changed everything. Kiss is responsible for making me fall in love with music, in a becoming a fan of music. Let's say that way. I loved music, but I became a fan of music and a connoisseur of music because of Kiss. And it began with, I think, a lot of kids my age, because of the way they looked.
Yeah.
I decided Kiss was my favorite band before I heard a note,
Yeah.
because of what they looked like. They were it's all the stuff. They were comic book characters. And I was obsessed with Kiss. And this is just when I was about to start buying my own records. And I remember this very clearly. I was at a department store that sold records, and I had Kiss Alive, their first live record from 1975, in one hand, and I had Sean Cassidy's "Da Do Run Run" in the other. And Dave, I bought that Sean Cassidy record. That's the first record I ever bought with my own money. And I took the record home, and I loved that song, "Da Do Run Run." And I put the record on, and I got maybe 2 or 3 songs into this record. This is a totally true story. And I started crying because I was so disappointed that I didn't get the Kiss record. So I took the needle of the shitty little record player that I had and deliberately tried to scratch the record so that I could take the record back, say it was scratched, and exchange it for the Kiss record. That plan went awry, never happened, and however many weeks later, however many chores I had to do to get the $10 or whatever it was to buy Kiss Alive, that became the second record I ever owned in my life, was Kiss Alive 1. And, you know, flash forward to, and this, I'm probably in 5th grade at this point, and all manner of Kiss fandom then begins. I have a tennis racket where I'm playing air guitar and performing the whole album front to back. I have Star Wars figures where I am pretending they're Kiss, where Chewbacca is Gene Simmons and Han Solo is Paul Stanley and Greedo is Peter Criss, and the whole that I'm playing like they're Kiss on stage. So I became completely obsessed with Kiss. I got every Kiss magazine you could. I used to go to Alvera Street in LA and buy these 6-foot tall Kiss posters. Every inch of my bedroom wall was covered with Kiss. The first concert I ever went to in my life was in 1979 at the LA Forum, which was on the Dynasty tour. That was the first show I ever went to. So Kiss was my first love. And that then AC/DC became my favorite band, and then Van Halen became my favorite band, and then it's an Iron Maiden and this, and then it's Ramones and Sex Pistols and whatever, and all that stuff starts to evolve. But Kiss is absolutely ground zero for me. I was so obsessed or so delusional about Kiss that, you know how when you'll see sometimes in magazines where there will be like a reverse negative of a photo that is taken from a reverse negative, and people will be like playing guitar left-handed.
Yeah.
I didn't understand that the photo had been reversed. I was convinced that Kiss was so talented that on some nights they would just decide to play left-handed because
change it up.
That's how fucking talented they were. So this is a very long rambling thing about Kiss, but they were my everything. I mean, they really, really were. And I was always a Paul guy. I thought Paul was, I mean, Gene is obviously the looks the coolest and all this stuff, but I liked all the Paul songs. I liked the banter between songs. I was a Paul guy. But Ace was undeniably the sort of the heart of Kiss, if you will. And the real clarity about the power of Ace Frehley as it relates to Kiss, above and beyond his guitar solos. He's my favorite kind of guitar player, where, when we've talked about this a lot on the show, but where you could sing his solos. His solos exactly fit the song. He was certainly not a shredder, but very, mood driven and melody driven. And then in 1978,
it kind of brings the song together. It
fits, I mean,
it fits where it is.
They're almost songs within songs. They really are. And in 1978, the band, they released the solo albums, which each of them put out their own album. Aces is widely considered and is definitively the best of the 4. It's got New York Groove on it, his cover of New York Groove, Rip It Out, Snowblind, not the Sabbath song, but it's a great record. And that was the moment where I think everybody went, oh, like, Ace is even more talented than we had all been giving him credit for being. And And yeah, and he had his ups and downs and had all kinds of drugs and alcohol problems and whatever. But after Dynasty, that was the last Kiss record I cared about. I didn't really sort of care about them beyond that. And when I started to get into those other bands, Kiss started to fade away from me. But those early records, really the first record, self-titled, through like Rock and Roll Over, are all, well, through Alive 2, I get, really, are all fucking great. I don't know if I would think they were great if they looked like normal people, or if I didn't think they were the coolest thing since sliced bread before I heard a note. But they are such a, none of those records would I consider among my favorite records of all time. But I would have never gotten to my favorite records of all time if it weren't for Kiss.
Well said.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to spend Cultural Corner talking about that. Kiss is not our topic tonight,
Yeah.
but Kiss is a phenom. Like they weren't a rock band as much as they were performers. And their shows were a performance. They were in a costume. They were the ones who kind of brought pyrotechnics to the metal conversation, right? There had been effects before, and there were narrative performances before, if you will. I don't know how else to express it. I'm not sure when Meatloaf started his thing, but he's another one that's very theatrical, very
Yeah, Bad Out of
performance,
Hell, I think, is 76 or 77. So,
kind of in that realm. Uh, Sticks, right, is another very like performancy kind of a band, and they have this very narrative sort of feel to their songs and to their shows. But they had more like refined qualities, and Kiss was raw. Kiss was energy and emotion and like adolescence that was bottled. And um so it was really important to me to acknowledge the passing of Ace Frehley, and to get some of your thoughts on record as our cultural corner, because that really is a contemporary callback to our conversation and what we're building and what we've built on, and why we're in a contemporary time talking about the past and how we got here, right? Ace Frehley is a bridge from here to there. Um,
yeah, and I think as we get well beyond the 70s and start to talk about, kind of proper metal bands and grunge bands and even a bunch of punk bands, any of those guitar players from an age were obsessed with Kiss. Whether you're Buzz Osborne of the Melvins or Kim Thayil of Soundgarden, you were obsessed with Kiss. All those guys were. They all wanted to be Ace Frehley. And that, a lot of those guys are better guitar players than Ace ever was. But he really did. I mean, you could argue outside of Eddie Van Halen, Ace Frehley might be the most influential guitar player of 80s, 90s, and early 2000s rock guitarists. Like, they were
yeah,
all influenced by Ace because everybody loved Kiss.
sure. Yeah, there's a line in that Weezer song from the Blue album, like my favorite rock band, Kiss, and talking
Yeah.
about I've got Ace Frehley, I've got Peter Criss.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. All right. Is there anything else you wanted to say about Ace Frehley or Kiss before we move on to our topic
No,
du
I
jour?
will hold the rest of it until we get to our proper Kiss episode. I've gone
Okay.
on long
There's
enough,
more to
but
say.
there is.
So, ladies and gentlemen, you're just going to have to subscribe and wait until we get there.
That's right.
We'll
R.I.P.
try to fill up your time with some interesting chatter. We'll do our best.
Yeah, hopefully Budgie isn't a letdown after spending the time talking about Ace and Kiss, but I think Budgie fits the conversation. Budgie's music is not too far removed from Kiss's music.
Yeah.
Um, so let's talk about Budgie.
Let's talk. All right.
Budgie.
So bring it on home and start us off.
All right, let's just I'll give you a little bit of history of this band and the song, and then we'll chat about it. So Budgie, they were a Welsh power trio. We loved our power trios. Formed in 1967 by singer and bassist Burke Shelley, guitarist Tony Borg, and drummer Ray Phillips. Their self-titled debut album was produced by Roger Bain, who also produced Black Sabbath's first three albums, as well as Judas Priest's Rock and Rolla. And that record, Budgie's self-titled, was released by MCA Records on July 30th, 1971. At the time of its release, the album was considered among the heaviest of hard rock at the time, but it was ultimately a commercial failure. Despite never achieving mainstream success, Budgie would prove to be a significant influence, a la Ace Frehley, to loads of hard rock kids growing up in the early 70s, including future members of, roll call please, Iron Maiden, Van Halen, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, Queens of the Stone Age, and most notably, of course, Metallica, who would cover both Crash Course in Brain Surgery, which was a non-album single released to support their first album, and Bread Fan from their third record, Never Turn Your Back on a Friend. This gave Budgie a notoriety that they never enjoyed in their heyday, and I'm sure is paying their mortgages for a long, long while into the future. So, Dave, I think it's safe to say that anybody my age or your age or younger are only aware of Budgie due to Metallica. But what is your history with this band? I think they fit into this very interesting category of me related to Metallica. We'll talk about that in a second. But what's your relationship with Budgie?
So, Budgie is a recent find for me in the same vein as Sir Lord Baltimore. Not as recent, because Sir Lord Baltimore I found during the journey of this podcast. Budgie I stumbled on maybe 2 years ago, but it was the same Spotify algorithm that ran out of whatever I was playing and started playing something else. And what it started playing was actually, I have to look it up because I can never remember the name of it. Nude Disintegrating Parachutist Woman, which is another song from this album. And I don't understand the name and I don't care because it's awesome. And then I recognized that that they had the stuff that Metallica had covered, and was shocked to have to have it come through a Spotify algorithm. I'm like, oh wow, okay, this is working. Um, so I did not know about the connection, but I knew the Metallica songs well in advance. I knew of them for years, since would have been 1991 that I think I heard those songs. Because I got into Metallica late in high school when "And Justice for All" was coming out, and I kind of went backwards. And I sort of stopped right there too, truth be told. Um, but yeah, so I didn't have a relationship with them. But once I started listening to them and digging more into them, I was surprised that I hadn't heard of them, like Sir Lord Baltimore, and had a very similar attraction to them. And then come to find that they're a power trio with a singing bass player
Mm-hmm.
who has this high register, and they often get compared to Rush. And somewhere I saw that they were compared to a cross between Rush and Black Sabbath. I
Which I
was like,
think is perfect.
I do too.
Yeah.
And I love both of those bands, and so of course I would like their love child. And it's yeah, so I dig it, and I've really enjoyed getting more familiar with their music over time. This is three of these songs: Bread Fan, Crash Course in Brain Surgery, and actually four, our song tonight, Guts, and New Disintegrating Parachutist Woman, are in various motorcycle playlists because I can hear them through the wind noise. And so I actually have spent quite a bit of time with those few songs. And I'm so glad to know Budgie.
Excellent. Well, you might have a little bit more in-depth appreciation for Budgie, and I want to hear all about that, and of course your take on Guts in particular. But like we talked about Ace Frehley and the influence of Kiss, I don't think the influence of Metallica on scores of bands, or no, the exposure, let's say, that Metallica gave scores of bands, probably more than, I might argue, any band in hard rock history. I was, basically along for the Metallica ride from the jump, from I guess Ride the Lightning was really the first record, but Kill 'Em All and Ride the Lightning around 82, 83. Um and from the beginning with those guys, first with t-shirts. So
Oh yeah.
Misfits, Discharge, GBH, Septic Death, like tons and tons of bands that we had not heard before, we went and sought out as teenage kids because Metallica was wearing their t-shirts. And then when Garage Days, they start putting out these covers. First, the Garage Days Revisited, which was the B-side of the Creeping Death single, which was a cover of Diamond Head's Am I Evil and the song Blitzkrieg by the band Blitzkrieg. So if you think of Diamond Head and Blitzkrieg and Sweet Savage and Holocaust and Budgie, all of these bands that Metallica was exposing to people that never heard of them. And famously, Metallica would play these guys' songs in clubs and not cop to the fact that they were covers. They would sell them
Right.
as their own songs because nobody had
Right.
heard any of these songs. It's
Right.
basically because Lars grew up in Denmark and found all these obscure, new wave of British heavy metal bands, basically, that nobody in the States had really, except for, deep tape traders. And we were all at the time, from my generation, too young to have been exposed to that stuff. So we were hearing all of these songs. And I just think it's really interesting where Sir Lord Baltimore is a perfect example. If Metallica does a Sir Lord Baltimore cover, maybe not instead of, but in addition to Budgie or Diamond Head or whomever, they probably have tens of thousands of additional streams and record sales and all of these things because of the exposure that Metallica would have, doesn't pick a band. Like these bands that Metallica happened to recover songs of became really well known, and maybe only the one song, but gained a level of notoriety that they never would have gotten if not for Metallica's stamp of approval, which I think is just really interesting. And I think Budgie, their music is really representative of that sound, of Diamond Head and of Sweet Savage and of Holocaust and all of those, those new wave of British heavy metal bands that didn't become Iron Maiden or Def Leppard, like those bands that feel kind of like dirty, kind of hard rock that never did anything in the States. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's almost like a separate genre to me, and Budgie is really representative of it. Yes, they do sound like a mix of Rush and Black Sabbath, but they're not nearly as technical as Rush, and they're not nearly as bluesy or heavy as Sabbath. So they're kind of almost like a garage rock version of Black Sabbath meets Rush, but really good, really good. But there's something a little
If
bit
so,
missing.
if Budgie is the love child of Black Sabbath and Rush, it's the child when the child is 12, right?
Oh, that's
It's
fair.
not the fully formed kid, but you can see the mom and you can see the dad, but it's not matured yet,
Hmm.
right? It's the raw basic, but it's all the DNA.
That's a really good description. Budgie is an interesting. Their music to me sits so in between clubs and arenas. They don't sound. They sound too big to play in a club. They're just their sound, like too grand to play in a club, but they're not nearly as polished or big enough to sound like they belong in an arena. So they're kind of this tweener thing that I dig, but it definitely still sounds like underground to me. It's there's a griminess to it that I like.
Yeah, I mean, I could see them at not at a bar, but at like the Fillmore or the Great American Music
Yeah.
Hall.
Okay.
Like that mid-genre, that mid-venue, um,
Like not quite a theater, but yeah, Fillmore is a good call.
like it's bigger than a bar or club, but it's not an arena. Um, yeah, so very interesting. Talk to us about this song. What do you feel about the song?
The main thing about this song, and it's funny that the guitar, not specifically the song, the guitar, broadly speaking, is the main instrument of, let's just call it heavy music. Like that, that let's just say the electric guitar is kind of the center, and we go into the saxophone and all this other stuff. But for as significant as the electric guitar is to this stuff we're talking about, I feel like we don't talk about the guitar all that much. I mean, if we're talking about Hendrix, obviously, or Tony Iommi or somebody, but we
Right,
we
right.
actually don't talk about the guitar that much. We
No,
often
no,
talk
we
about
talk
the
about the bass.
yeah,
We on this program, Michael, we talk about the harp.
we
Um,
that's right. We talk about
but
the harp.
yeah,
God bless you, Alice Coltrane. Um,
let's talk about guitar.
let's talk about guitar, because to me that is why I really love this song and why I wanted this to be the Budgie song. Is there is something hypnotic about the repetition of that
Yeah.
heavy guitar riff in this song. It's the same thing in the song Bread Fan. Like, I think Budgie excels at that, and there's not variation in it. A lot of times a guitar phrase will, the 1 and the 3 will have a different cap on the guitar riff, and then the 2 and the 4 will have a different cap, so you're not playing the same thing exactly 4 times in a row. This is one riff, and they just repeat it 4 times over and over again. I mean, a lot of music does that, but I think that's what makes it so cool, is there's not a lot of variation in the main guitar part, and that gives it this weight. And again, there's kind of a griminess and a the production on it is kind of thin, but for some reason that gives it a heaviness which doesn't even necessarily make sense. But there's something about it that gives it a punch that's in the high end that makes it heavy to me. I really, really like it. It's got a great energy.
Agreed. One of the things that strikes me about the heaviness of the song is the descending phonic of the riff. Dun, 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 dun. Like it
Yes.
brings us down because it's
Yes.
heavy. And
Yes.
it keeps doing that. And then we've got the very high register of Shelley's voice. Um, and so it's this counterbalance that gives a depth between the high register and the descending guitar riff and that repetition, and it just drives with the bass and the drums, marching forward and continually down, da, 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 and you just repeat this descending, um, this sense of descent. So it's super heavy in that regard, but in the element of being a trio, again, they're all carrying a lot of weight, and so there's no margin, there's no fluff. Everything is used. It's all put to work, which I love. This is why I love power trios, and I think this is what is lovable about power trios. Everything's working. It's
Yeah.
all on display.
Yeah. Do you like the vocal?
You know, perhaps because I got broken in with Geddy Lee, which took effort. It
Hmm.
took me a long time to get Geddy's vocals. Uh, it was familiar ground, and so I had a moment of, oh, that's different, but it was so close to, it was so familiar that it didn't throw me off. I observed it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like it. I think one of the things that worked in Metallica's favor with all of the, Budgie and Diamond Head specifically are good examples of this. Both have singers that have higher register voices and kind of sing with this wail. that James Hetfield, particularly early on, did not do.
Yeah,
And that made it so much heavier, you
sure.
know, and gave it a toughness and an edge that the originals do not have, because the singer is singing more operatically, like a Bruce Dickinson would, or a Rob Halford, or whomever. Um, so I think it's interesting, and when you listen to their version of Crash Course and Brain Surgery and Metallica's, I mean, modern day production and the down, all the
Well,
stuff.
and Metallica has two guitar players, right? So there's a
Right.
lot more texture there, and there's a lot more weight in that part, that neighborhood of
True.
the song.
True. True. True.
Um,
Um, you were talking about Geddy Lee, and I have to share this just because it broke my brain a few years ago as it relates to Geddy Lee, and now I think about it quite regularly, and specifically when his voice is mentioned. Me and my buddy Rick were at a show, I don't know, probably 2 years ago now, give or take, and I can't even remember who we were seeing. But while we were waiting for the band to come on, they were playing music over the PA in the theater, and they were playing Susie and the Banshees, whom I love. And Rick had some negative reaction, or I don't know what he did. And I'm like, how the you don't fucking like Susie and the Banshees? Are you fucking nuts? And he's like, yeah, man, every time I hear her voice, all I can hear is Geddy Lee. And actually, if you listen to Susie Sue and Geddy Lee actually sound a lot alike. And I'd never
oh,
noticed that
wow.
until Rick pointed it out, and it kind of fucked me up. And so now I'm fucking all of you up for having to recognize the similarity between Geddy Lee and Susie Sue. So
Thank you, Rick.
yeah,
I
thank
have
you.
to go back and listen to that. Monica really likes Susie and the Banshees.
Me too.
Don't think she's into Rush. I'm going to blow her mind and let her know that she actually is into Rush. She's been into Rush this whole time.
So when you think about Budgie, where do you think about them in the how much do they weigh when it comes to
Yeah.
heavy? Where do they fit? Now we are a year removed from the first two Black Sabbath records as the most, important totems of heavy. Is this heavy?
This is super heavy.
Yeah.
Um, and the the tragedy is the obscurity of it. The tragedy is the fact that it wasn't as commercially successful, but not only is it heavy, is its heaviness self-evident, the all-star cast of people who have covered this music tells us
Mhm.
this is their influence, and we already know they're heavy. The influenced are heavy. So by extension, their influences must be heavy. The math is clear. Uh, it it's almost like, you know, and bands like Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, Black Sabbath all defy this metaphor, so bear with me. But it's just as much weight, but it's in the metric system. And we're not familiar with that here, so we have blinders on, right? Um, so it's just the unit of measure is different, but damn, it's heavy. I don't know how to do the conversion. I see kilograms and I don't know if it's heavy, but when I weigh it, whoa, yeah, that's heavy.
Yeah. When I think about it in the context of our playlist, everything that we've talked about so far, and I'm just looking at some of our past few episodes, Alice Coltrane and Funkadelic, of course, but The Who, Pink Floyd, Janis Joplin, Deep Purple, Sir Lord Baltimore, Atomic Rooster, Uriah Heep. This definitely fits. I mean, this song is not an outlier, and
It's
you
not
can
proto heavy
feel.
like some of those others are. It's arrived heavy.
Yes, yes. This is among, and we're going to get into more and more of these as we get into certainly into the 70s. But this is, to me, this is definitely a heavy metal song, or
Hmm.
this is a heavy metal band. I think a
Yeah.
lot of the stuff we've talked about so far that have qualifiers. Deep Purple is a hard rock band. Uriah Heep is a hard rock band. Um, but I think you could argue that Budgie is a heavy metal band.
100% agree with that. Um, and one of the things that I like that I think fits that metal persona is I was what did he say? Ah, the band had initially considered going under the name 6 Ton Budgie, but decided shorter single word variant was preferable. Burke Shelley has said the band's name came from the fact that he loved the idea of playing noisy, heavy rock, but calling ourselves after something diametrically opposed to that. And just that concept
I like it.
seems very metal to me and very heavy to me. And for those not in the know, a budgie is a tiny little bird like a finch. So if you like, I didn't know what a budgie was. I didn't understand where that came from. I thought it was a play on smudge, the word smudge. But it's a bird, and it's a dainty, tiny little pretty bird. And a lot of birds have song. You know, songbirds are very elegant and graceful and dainty. And this is stompy, heavy, loud, crashing music. I love that. I love the sound, but also that notion that they're going to be playful a little bit with it and know exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, and even the album cover, it
Oh
is
yeah,
one of the aforementioned budgies with a human body riding a horse in the clouds. Like it's this very you would not identify this music being represented by that album cover.
right, right. It's
Um,
colorful and
yeah,
buoyant
it's kind of
and
a pink
jubilant.
background. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they're a band I feel like I need to dig deeper into in terms of like a YouTube rabbit hole because I have no perception at all of how they presented themselves, like
Mm.
what their live show looked like or kind of what their stage energy was or what they wore or kind of how they presented, which would be very interesting.
Hmm.
This definitely feels, and of course, we're a decade away from Iron Maiden's first record, but this feels light years away from Iron Maiden to me. This definitely feels closer to, well, I don't know. It doesn't sound anything like Sabbath to me either. I mean, I can see the love child between Rush and Black Sabbath I buy. I think that's right. But they don't sound like Sabbath.
No, but I feel like they and Sir Lord Baltimore are really good,
Yeah.
a really good analog, right? Those guys feel like they should be on tour together to me.
In 2 weeks, we're going to talk about Tarkus. They fit into this conversation. I think Atomic Rooster fits into this
Mhm.
conversation. Uriah Heep is not that far removed from this conversation. Those bands all feel like more of a piece to me. Maybe Uriah Heep had significantly more popularity, so maybe they're a little bit outside of it.
Well,
But
and a lot of their sound went different than the one song that we did, Uriah
yeah,
Heep.
yeah, yeah, that's true. Yeah,
And to be fair, half of this album, this Budgie album, is on the other side of the spectrum of music. It's quiet,
a
it's
lot of quiet
melodic.
stuff. Yeah, yeah.
So they do have range, and we picked one of the 3 songs that are super heavy on this album. But it is heavy, and so it needs to be here.
Talk a little bit about other Budgie stuff. So, the only thing I have ever checked out from them is really this album and Crash Course, just because I have it on a bunch of covers playlists because I love the Metallica version so much. But is there anything else specific in the Budgie catalog you would recommend, or is it just really this album?
It's this album. I really love "Nude Disintegrating Woman." That's such a great song. And I couldn't find a studio version of Bread Fan by Budgie on Spotify. So maybe it's not licensed right or something, but the only Bread Fan version I found was a live version from Budgie on a live album of theirs.
Yeah, that album and a third record, which is called Never Turn Your Back on a Friend, that record is not available. And I'm sure it's, maybe the label went out of business or who knows what. That shit happens all the time. So yeah, I'm not sure I've ever heard the studio version of Bread Fan by Budgie. That
Yeah.
song's so good.
It's really good. It's really
Yeah.
good.
And they released one, two, three, four, five. They've released 11 studio albums, the most recent of which was 2006. So they were active for a long time.
Yeah, and one of the notes said that in the 1975 release Bandolier, they also started to incorporate funk.
Huh?
And
That sounds like a bad
uh,
idea.
well, you can't be a bass player and avoid it forever. You just
It's
can't.
hard.
You can't.
Yeah. No, it's really hard. You got to slap at a bass.
Got to
Um
do it.
all right, Dave, Budgie. Anything else that we needed to hit that we didn't? I think we kind of covered it.
Yeah, no, I think that when you find a band like Metallica that starts covering a lot of other stuff and you like those covers, it's probably worth spending time to go deep into the vault, find the original source material, and give that a listen. So we'll have to bring that thread back into more conversations as we get later and we have more crossover with later bands covering things that maybe we've talked about. That'd be
Right.
fun to bring up again.
It will be. It will be. Okay, but now, Dave, let's do song v song. Every week we take our current champion, our favorite song to date that we have discussed, and put it up against the current song that we have discussed on this episode. My current champion is "Won't Get Fooled Again" by The Who, which is a great song from episode 35. Yours, however, though, was a bold statement and an incredible song. It is Alice Coltrane's "Journey in Satchidananda" from episode 37. Dave, how is Budgie going to fare against our favorite harpist?
So Budgie wins the day, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh,
Um, I I had a I saw the
Alice was not
order.
around for long.
No, but and I saw what was going to happen, and that's one of the reasons that I chose Alice Coltrane. Is I really was taken by that song. First of all, first and foremost, it was a legit choice. But um, my prior choice had had plenty of time in the sun, and I wanted to give a little bit of a highlight to Alice Coltrane because I was really moved by that. But I saw Budgie on the list and I knew where things were headed. Um, and maybe it's confirmation bias, but this was not the song I was most familiar with of the ones that I am. And so I got to hear some kind of new old stock. It's definitely a Budgie song, one that I wasn't familiar with as much. So I really enjoyed my time with this song, and this takes it for me this week.
I love it. I love this this energy, this corner of heavy, you really resonates with you. The Sir Lord Baltimore's, the Budgies, and
Love it.
I love that. I love that. Budgie is not going to beat the Who for me. Again, I love "Won't Get Fooled Again." It's an important song for me for many years. So I will hold on to it for now. We know that each of our champions are going to survive at least through next week, because next week we will not be talking about a song, Dave. Next week
No,
we are
sir.
going to put a cap on 1971, and oh, what a cap it is. As we complete each year that Black Sabbath released a studio album with original singer Ozzy Osbourne, we talk about that album. So next week it is LP3, David, and we are going to talk about Master of Reality. Holy shit.
This is going to be a good conversation and a very fun week of revisiting a wonderful album.
It is, and related to our verses segment of the show, recall that Dave's current Black Sabbath LP champion is a self-titled debut. My current Black Sabbath LP champion is LP number 2, Paranoid. We will pit each of those against Master of Reality next week. That is sure to be a fun conversation. All right, man.
Looking forward
Good to see
it.
you again. That was fun. I'm sorry I went so long on Ace, but I'm glad we talked about him.
He deserves his time as well. It was a good trip down memory lane.
It really was. Thank you for that. Rest in peace, Ace Frehley. Stay heavy.
Okay, thank you. Bye.